Warning: this podcast may contain strong language, sensitive topics, and plenty of laugh out loud moments. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Thrivin with DVIBZ. We're so happy to be here again today, talking with you about something that's, I think, under our skin a little bit and something that we really want to get into. And that's really the topic around responsible consumption and what other people can and cannot understand about our own choices. And so today we're gonna speak about the incredible uniqueness of cannabis and how each person needs to determine through their own discernment what is the appropriate method of consumption, the quantity of consumption, basically everything that's personal about cannabis. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. And we're going to unpack some key topics around discernment versus judgment. What does responsible cannabis use? What is intentional cannabis use? And we're going to talk all about that today. So I know I'm really excited to hear from you, Dee. I know you've got some deep thoughts on this. So wherever you want to pick it from, let's just start there and begin.
Thanks, Nick. And when you say deep thoughts, I think you mean rants. And I have both of those things about this topic. So I don't even hardly know where to start with this. Because, the thing about it is, this is a question for everybody. What do you wish that people in general understood about cannabis and your relationship with cannabis? Like, what are those things? And one of those things, the most number one thing that I wish that people understood about cannabis is that relationship with the plant is unique to each individual. Okay, there is absolutely no one size fits all. Yes, we have commonalities in our cannabis consumption. Yes, we have common things that we experience, like cotton mouth. Many people experience that, or the munchies, or whatever. But our experience and our tolerance is completely unique to us. And the reason why that's so critical to understand is because there is so much judgment towards cannabis use, right? I mean, I don't know, Nick, have you ever experienced this? Like, do you know what I'm talking about here?
I experience it on a near weekly basis, if not more. Some version of it.
It's like brutal still. And like, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter whether you're in a legal environment or an illegal environment or some gray area in between. There's still a lot of stigma and discrimination against cannabis consumers, right? The consumption of cannabis. And people, even other consumers, think they got this idea about how much and how often and what works for somebody else based on what works for them. But here's the only thing that you will learn about about your own experience based on that. And that is that relationship is unique to you. What works for you doesn't necessarily work for someone else. And you see this all the time with, people with very high tolerance levels consuming with someone who doesn't have a very high tolerance level. That person is probably sleeping, and the other person's probably like ready to maybe go for a nice walk or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you consume on a regular basis, daily, often your tolerance level is going to be way higher than someone who just, partakes on the weekend or at the party that they went to, Mm-hmm. So we can't possibly. And then the other thing is, we all are walking our own path. There's that old saying about like, you can't really judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. And, I feel that this is true. You don't know what the fuck is going on with someone else. Who it's not your business to know about them. And first of all, and second of all, you should just really worry about yourself. Become an expert of your own experience. Just worry about that. And don't worry about someone else's consumption if it's different than your own. So trying to mitigate, trying to control somebody else's consumption, it's just not happening. You know, it's not only unrealistic, but it's incredibly unfair, you know, to another individual. So, you know, if that's your jam, if that's the kind of person you are, then you're gonna like be like, oh, shut up, you know, what are you talking about? But like, if you actually care about other people, and actually want to treat people how you probably want them to treat you, then, you know, you need to not worry so much about judging someone else's cannabis use, and just be, you know, discerning about your own. That's my rant.
I love it. I love it. No, I mean, you've touched on like some like critical points about this conversation. You've really laid the table for what it is that we want to talk about today. Well, you know, there's this, what I wanted to add to what you had said was the stigma, right? We've lived through 100+ years of some version of prohibition, which has come with it a stigma, which is, impossible as it is to believe, almost stronger and more powerful than the legal system of prohibition ever was. You know, even though you could have gotten locked up or worse for consuming or having a possession or whatever, the stigma is still with us. The fog, that stench of stigma has not lifted, even though a lot of the legal restrictions in certain places has changed. And I think that you're absolutely right. There is a different society has a different view on purchasing cannabis and consuming cannabis. And also what you mentioned, I think that was really important, is the internal versus external stigma that surrounds us all, right? As cannabis consumers, not only are we the recipients of this stigma, but if we go around judging other people's choices, if we're critical of how people consume or what time of the day they begin their consumption or how what are the products that they use, then we are actually reinforcing that same stigma, but in a worse way, because it's on ourselves, it's on our community. And so we're actually recreating a lot of this stigma on ourselves. And I see it online. I know you do as well as in real life, where people have these very harsh views on someone that, even though they're a consumer, oh, I like smoking cannabis or whatever, but I'm not a stoner. I'm not a pothead. I'm not one of those people. Mm-hmm. You know, and for me, I interact with people who are in the, you know, spiritual or conscious world, right? And they have views on cannabis which I think are ridiculous, right? They like, oh, you know, you shouldn't do that. It's not good for, you know, if you want to keep a clear channel or whatever, you know, kind of mumbo jumbo people will say. It's really real, this stigma, and it has a huge impact on us. And so as consumers, it's important that we do not recreate these situations. Yes, there's a conversation to be had about what intentional cannabis might look like for you or for me, but that, like you said, that needs to be an internal conversation, not one where we're looking out and trying to decide for other people, or even just saying things like, someone online today was like someone said, oh, I really like vaping or something in my house, and then, well, so, oh, you shouldn't be vaping, that's silly, you know, you should be smoking a joint. And it just really, for me, misses the whole opportunity that we have as a community right now.
Well, and you're so right, and it really speaks to, you know, what we've discussed before, and that is, in our community, in our cannabis community, you know, there is a lot of mental health issues. Like that is just the truth of it, right? Yeah. Because that's why, one of the reasons people are self-medicating. It's not the only reason, for sure, right? There are tons of reasons, and you know, we just don't know about what's happening with someone else on an inside, on a deep inside level. We just can't say. And so it's not for us to judge, because we can't possibly know. Now, that's not to say that, you know, as we understand our own experience and we approach it, you know, in a way that works for us and positively contributes to our life, because that's the goal in my mind, right? You want it to positively contribute, not destroy your life, right? And that happens. It does happen. So, first of all, like, you get to choose about what kind of relationship you want to have at this point, right? And the thing about it is, no matter what, no matter whether you agree with us or don't agree with us, what I love about this podcast is, like, it's, the idea of approaching cannabis consciously and with intention that we refer to as cannatherapy. It's one of those things that once you know it, you can't unknow it. Yeah. So it's like, we got you. So now that if you've listened to any of our podcasts, you get to choose what that relationship is like. And, it's really good, of course. Not only can you share your experience, but you can benefit and learn from other people's experience. And that's why consumers, one of the reasons why it's so valuable for consumers to be around other consumers, and not be left isolated alone, by themselves to try to figure it all out. Thank goodness there's the internet now, and I don't know what AI is like when you talk about it in terms of cannabis, but you can find information nowadays at the touch of a finger. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, you just have to, and yeah, I'm saying have to, right? You just have to mind your own business and deal with yourself and worry about your relationship with this plant. Are you getting everything? Are you making the most out of it? Do you want to make the most out of it? Maybe you don't want to. Hey, maybe you don't give a shit. Maybe life is so great, man. You're just happy to have just to get another thing to play with, Maybe, I don't know. But I've never met anybody who didn't find didn't find therapeutic benefit in their use of cannabis.
Yeah.
And so, when you, but Nick, I just want to back up a little bit, because we use some terms in this podcast, and I thought we should go through them and explain what we mean by it, right? So the terms that I'm talking about are things like use and cannabis abuse and utilization. And how are those things different in our minds? What do you think about that?
Well, okay, let me just get those. So you said use. What was the second one? Abuse?
Yes.
And utilization.
Mm-hmm. I think those are the three things that we've kind of how we framed it.
Right. Well, for me, like, all of them, everything is use, whether it's intentional or harmful or positive or neutral. It's all cannabis use. Like, we're all using the same plant at some level, right? Whereas abuse for me is abuse is really to the point where a substance or a habit or something is causing you harm, but you're not really able to break away from it. Like, even though you see the harm being caused, it's something you cannot control or stop when you want to. And then utilization, it makes me think of, like, Hemingway actually used to talk about utilizing alcohol in his writing and things like that. So that's kind of where it takes me a little bit, but it's like, it's using cannabis as a tool, using cannabis as, like, okay, I need to do the following activities, and cannabis is going to support that in the following ways. So for me, that's what I see as utilization.
I think those are really good definitions, and mine basically mirror that. Like, cannabis use is cannabis use. It can be conscious or unconscious, but often when I think about it in my mind, when I use that word use, I don't know. I guess I feel like, okay, here's where I anthropomorphize the plant, right? And I think of her as a female, right? And as another female, and I think about the use of a female, right? So I think of it in terms of that. And so, use, is just kind of like, little bit maybe taking it for granted or whatever, you know, it's there, I got it, you know, whatever. And, you know, but like, whatever, it's very neutral, right? And then abuse to me is when the plant is not helping you. You're not, you know, it's not helping you move forward in your life. Whether that's, you know, personally, whatever, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally, because you're right, like the utilization of it, that's where I go in terms of seeing it as a tool, right? So that's how I like imagine all these things that I have there in my little toolkit. And, you know, cannabis is one of those tools, but it's like that, you know, it's like a saw, like it's such a versatile tool. You know, I don't know if a saw is a versatile tool.
I mean, you could cut down a tree and you could turn it into a musical instrument.
Well, there you go. But I'm sure there's more. Like I'm sure a screwdriver. I don't know. Okay, there's a question for the comments. What is the most useful, one of the most useful tools in the toolkit?
Versatile, right? What's the one tool that you can use for many different things?
Yeah. Well, a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, there you
go. Okay. So it's the Swiss Army knife of, you know, therapeutic tools in my mind. Yeah. So yeah. And so for me, I just really want to like dial in on this and be really clear about this. When I think of that in terms of utilize, that is what leads me to cannatherapy. It leads me to call it therapy because I'm utilizing that plant to enhance my wellness, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I don't know. That's just, I'm not saying that is the definition. I'm saying that's our definition. That's what we're saying. So when we're talking like that, that's kind of what we're talking about.
I wanted to also go back to another term that you mentioned and dive into this a little bit deeper, and that's the concept of tolerance. Because I think for people that may not have a lot of experience with cannabis, for people that have only used it in a recreational setting, like you said, at a party or, you know, Netflix and chill or something, like where it's only been just a little bit or in a social setting, when they look at someone who wakes up and is, you know, out there with their coffee, smoking a joint in the morning, you know, they're like, I mean, for me, I have relatives who smoke cigarettes, and I'll be out there smoking a joint in the same way that they're smoking a cigarette. And they're like, how are you still standing up? Like if I smoked even like 3 puffs of that, I would be, you know, I would be unconscious, not conscious, but I would be like, I'd have to sit down and whatever. So I think people maybe don't get that unlike alcohol, where, yeah, there is a tolerance curve for alcohol. Like if you drink every day, all day, your tolerance is going to get pretty big. But there's still, like, I've always noticed this with people who drink a lot, and when I drank a lot in my past, there's always like a switch that you can get over the hump. If with one more drink or one more shot, and then you're intoxicated. Like you are, like, you can, like, if you drink enough, you will get intoxicated. But with cannabis, this curve is a little steeper. And so if you are consuming every day, or, you know, I want to bring in medical cannabis for a minute too, because people who are relying on this as a true medicine, like for pain relief or whatever it is, they might need incredible quantities of cannabis in order to do that job. And so I think, just more to your point, like, that everyone needs to determine for themselves. But I wanted to get your thoughts on tolerance and how that plays into this conversation.
Well, tolerance is just like huge. And that is especially where I see that really effective is, or really having an effect, is when I'm sharing something with somebody, right? There's not too many people that I meet that have the same tolerance as me. Like, I'm just going to say that, right? I've been doing this for most of my life. So, you know, and I'm a, you know, regular consumer. And so my tolerance is my tolerance. And somebody who maybe don't walk that path, or maybe they just have a whole different physiology, they might not be able to keep up. You know, that's what I'm saying. So you said it actually in one of our very first episodes. You said, you know, you don't have to partake. If it comes around in the circle, you know, you can just pass. You don't have to puff first, right? So, you know, and that is, you know, part of you mitigating your own experience, right? Especially if you're, you know, trying to pace yourself throughout an event or an evening or whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, and that is one of the skills, honestly, that, you know, the cannabis chefs have, right? Is how do you dose that, you know, each serving or each item or however it is that you're infusing that meal in order to accommodate A, appetite, and B, you know, tolerance level.
Yeah.
Right. So anyhow.
I want to just jump back in on that. Did you want to keep going?
No.
Okay, I just want to jump in on the tolerance thing because what you said sparked something. There's a difference in tolerance between the products, right? Like you could be someone who well, I'll just speak for myself. You just spoke about edibles in terms of the chef stuff. So let me go there first.
Mm-hmm.
There's a group of people who edibles don't really do anything to. Like if I were to take like 100 milligrams or 200 milligrams of THC in an edible, I would start to feel buzz and I would get a little bit high at that point. If I were to give 200 milligrams of THC to a first time or an early consumer, they would see God. Like they could be like in a very distressed state. Like I'm sure we've all heard those tapes and calls to 911 or whatever for people that think they're dying, but they've just eaten.
I've been there. Oh my God, I've been there.
And so it's like, you don't know the difference. And so that's something that people point to, right? Like they'll say there's a stigma against smoking cannabis, right? Combusting cannabis. There's a whole group of people out there that want to eliminate the consumption part and say, just have a tincture, just have an edible. Maybe if you want to vape, you know, that's it, but no combustion because of, you know, blah, blah, blah. But there are people who without that joint, that's the method that actually works for them. That's the method that gives them relief, or that's the method that puts them where they need to be. So I just wanted to point out that, yeah, we can have various tolerance levels inside of cannabis, like where we have a very high tolerance for one product or one delivery system and a very low for another. And other people, we don't know, right? It's very mix and match, right? Everyone has their own blueprint, really.
Well, and let's go even further into that, down that rabbit hole, as it were, because, you know, you can have differences in your tolerance level at different times.
True.
Right? Like how you feel if you are consuming on a full stomach versus an empty stomach can have a real big difference in change, like a difference in experience, right? And so, there are just so many things that have to do with that tolerance that, again, that just reinforces that idea that, our relationship is unique to ourselves. So it's very difficult to give advice to someone based on what you have experienced.
Yeah.
Or solely on what you have experienced. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's okay if you're saying, like, this is what happened to me. Okay, this is what happened. But you can't be telling people or sharing with people. And I bring that up because I can't tell you how many times over the years, even till recently, like within the last year, how I've witnessed or been a party, being the recipient of somebody who has a very high tolerance for a certain product, then taking that product and sharing that with someone who has never had that product before. It is such a disaster, typically. That's usually when someone is overconsumed, because that person with the high tolerance thinks everybody has a tolerance of that. I don't want to think that they just don't care, because that would be really fucking sad. But I
don't care enough. Sometimes in those moments, they don't care enough to know, to find out.
Yeah, I hear it all the time. Like, oh, I gave my best friend finally was willing to try some cookies, and I gave her one, and like, oh, she was like got way too high and she's all mad at me now. Like, of course she's mad at you. and like, to be honest, I'm not gonna say that you deserve for her to be mad at you or him, but that was very irresponsible. And like, that is a repercussion of your responsibility, is that people you care about get pissed off at you.
Yeah.
So, and so I don't know if that kind of answers, what you're saying about discussing a bit more about tolerance, but tolerance, and then, and I do want to say something else, because I've heard this over the years too. People saying, oh, you got to take a tolerance break. And what they're meaning by that, of course, is to stop using cannabis for a time to reset your, endocannabinoid system. Although I think what you're really doing is starving your endocannabinoid system, but that's just my opinion. So like, to reset your endocannabinoid system, and then your tolerance level will go down. So then when you go back to consumption, you don't have to consume as much, and it's easier on your pocketbook or something. I don't know. I don't really know what then the theory is. I've taken lots of tolerance breaks, not by choice, just like circumstance, whether I'm too broke or I'm, going to sea or whatever, I've got to work, whatever. So, and like, I guess when I come back from having a break from cannabis, I guess that I get, what do you want me to say? Like, I get high quicker? That can happen in the beginning, but it doesn't stay like that. My tolerance is my tolerance, and I'm usually right back where I am normally on a day-to-day basis. And like, it probably would surprise you to tell you that I typically smoke maybe 1 or 2 joints a day. Like, I'm not like a big consumer anymore.
Yeah.
And why I'm not a big consumer is a whole topic for another podcast episode. But I'm just saying, like, it doesn't matter how much I smoke, and I can have more and I can have less, and I can have nothing, or I can have like 5 different kinds of products in one day.
Yeah,
I can layer my products, like, because that creates a whole other energy as well.
mm-hmm.
So you nailed it. Like, it's different for us as individuals, how we consume, what we consume, when we consume it is all unique. When we combine different products, that creates something different, and so that is unique. So like, how, knowing that for yourself, how the hell could you possibly think you could know for somebody else?
Yeah, I agree. I have, like, for me, I do think I like this concept of tolerance breaks. Like, I think it's an important conversation. But again, it comes from the healthier version of it is when I say things like, for me, I enjoy tolerance breaks, and I'll tell you why in a second, why I think for me it works. But again, a lot of people are like, oh, I did this tolerance break. It really was amazing. Now everybody has to do it. And which is really dumb.
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, just hang on, Frank. Like, we don't all need to do that just because you discovered it. I think that there's something about my own. So for me, I am a heavier consumer, and so I'm like, there are times where I do want to take a break from that for many reasons. But I think at the core of it, I learned something about myself on these like arcs. So generally, like, I'm going from like a week to 2 weeks, and then I'm trying to take a day or 2 days. And then throughout the year, I'm looking at like, hey, taking a couple weeks here, maybe even a month or 2. That hasn't happened in a couple of years, but that's always available. And I find that, in a way, it's like fasting. That's how I look at it. Like, where there are times where I abstain from food and drink because that's just what my body needs to reset and recover. And there's a big upside to that. And for me, that also exists from time to time with cannabis. However, I will say this as a caveat. Sometimes I go into this, I go into a tolerance break day or week, and day one, I'm like, no, this isn't the time. This is not the time. And it's not about willpower. It's just being like mere realistic, and the intuition and my relationship with the plant and everything I know, it just says, no, like put that off until next week because of whatever. And then usually I will see something throughout that time. So that will show me why I did that. But yeah, I think like, yeah, if you like it, it's great. If it's not for you, that's great too. So that's something that I think people should hopefully get from this episode.
I really love how you compared it to fasting, because in my mind, that's exactly what it's like. And the thing is, the reason I'm even talking it is because the truth is, and this is particularly important. Now, patient, that's a whole other phrase that I got a real issue with, because I understand what people mean when they say it.
Sorry, I didn't hear. What was the word?
Patient.
Oh, patient.
Patient. I went off on a tangent. So what I wanted to say was, first thing first, about tolerance breaks. The thing about it, yes, okay, they can be helpful and useful. And if you like doing that and you want to try it, go for it. And, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'm sure you'll get something good out of it, even if that's just going back to the plant. Okay. But some people don't have the luxury of a tolerance break.
Yeah.
Break. And this was my point that I wanted to ensure that we made. And those people that don't have that luxury, people who are utilizing cannabis for, shrinking tumors, pain relief, anything like that, no, you do not have to subject yourself to pain or illness just to take a tolerance break. No, you don't have to. Okay, there are lots of ways that you can get the benefits of a tolerance break without actually having to have that tolerance break. One of those ways is to switch up what you're doing. So if you're smoking and you need to smoke, because again, what most people don't understand about smoking is, no, it does not have the same feeling as vaping. It is actually different. And for someone who smokes, vaping can actually irritate their lungs. So I know it sounds crazy, right? But it can actually make their back of their throat itchy and make them cough. And also, it is a different experience. And if you are someone like myself who, when I am suffering with an attack of my chronic cluster headaches, and I need pain relief to occur within seconds. It's not even an option. I need it to occur within seconds. That smoking is the best methodology for that pain relief, right? Because it is the quickest acting. Smoking, vaping, that will have the faster effect than if you're even drinking it or eating it or, probably even a transdermal patch. I don't know, right? But the thing is that, that is one of the main things about smoking, is that it is the fastest delivery. So yeah, that's that. I feel like I don't want to shame people who cannot or don't want to take a tolerance break, because by doing so, that increases their suffering. And,
Absolutely.
So I did want to, I did want to say that.
I appreciate that. That's an important piece of this. Again, I think this is all layering back to what we're talking about today, which is you have to make the choices for you. I have to make the choices for me. You said something earlier, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know if it was on the recording or if it was when we were talking before, but you said like, you can't, I don't know how you said it, but basically like, forget about judgment. Like you don't even know what's going on. So like, even if you think you understand, you should not be bringing judgment, but there's a good chance that you don't actually understand what's going on. especially when you come with judgment and not curiosity and not openness, there's a good chance that you're really going to miss the boat, not just socially or ethically, but just factually. You might totally misunderstand. And that's something that a lot of cannabis consumers can relate to based on the outside world. How the outside world treats us is that ignorant, we don't know, but we're going to tell you what's what. We're going to tell you how to do your weed, your pot, whatever. We're going to make it. We know more than you. We know better than you what it's impacting you or its effects are. And I think that's the thing that we have to resist inside of the cannabis community at all costs, is to become those external judgy finger pointing and just very divisive and toxic ways that for the most part cannabis is still treated by a large percentage of the population.
Absolutely. And like this whole, I don't want to get into about the government either, okay, but this whole thing about divide and conquer in order to successfully take control of people, right? We don't need any more division. We don't need that in our own community. And they try all the time. It's like they try to pit patients, people that identify as patients, because somehow their need perhaps is greater than somebody who is self-medicating or in their eyes social consuming. Like we've got all these terms. We have all these terms and like judgments around this. And like that's a story as old as time from the powers that be and the status quo, right? Is keep them apart from each other because there's way more of us than there is of them.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, like, we don't need to participate in that kind of discrimination, especially when it's just not true. And that is one of those lessons that I have learned from the plant. And I thought tonight, as I was thinking about this topic over the last couple of days, and I was thinking about how I thought I was, in some ways, an expert of my own experience. I thought I knew so much about how cannabis was for me, how weed, and how much I could have without, freaking out or, losing control or whatever the case may be, going to sleep, eat my face off, whatever. I thought I kind of knew. And for me, I really got kind of an awakening when I became ill. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that tonight, because sometimes people give me a hard time for saying that I don't identify as a patient. And I really wanted to explain why that is.
Go for it.
So I was like a consumer for a long time, like 20 years. And then one day, literally, I'm not even exaggerating, one day I just woke up with this crazy pain, like a brain tumor in my head, spike in my head. And I thought, oh my God, this is like a freak thing. But I took some pills and then, like whatever, it went away eventually. And then the next day it happened again. And so I was like, oh my God, what's the matter with me? I got a brain tumor. So anyways, I went to the doctor, and thankfully I had like this textbook case of this condition called cluster headaches. And it's typically an episodic thing, but it became the kind I had was like chronic. It happened all the time. I've never been sick in my life, really, like physically like that. So I'd never been on pharmaceuticals, and I had to go on. So, but the thing was, I got to experience what I'd heard rumors of from other people and why they didn't like to take pharmaceuticals. So all the things that they said, like about nausea, about constipation, about, not feeling themselves and all that kind of stuff, right? And And I'm so grateful that I saw a doctor who suggested to me, she knew I was a cannabis consumer, and said to me, well, are you still, consuming cannabis? She didn't say it like that. She said, are you still smoking weed? But see, I haven't even triggered. Like, I'm even like conditioned to like, are you still consuming cannabis? Because, like I work in the industry where you got to call it cannabis, whatever.
Yeah.
And anyways, so she suggested that I try cannabis, and I had actually stopped using cannabis when that started because I didn't know if maybe it was my cannabis use that triggered that condition.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
right? And everybody, of course, is quick to like jump on that bandwagon.
Of course.
Right? So anyways, when that doctor said that, it made me go and start to look into some of the rumors I had heard about cannabis, especially for cancer. Anybody that's been around anybody that's dealt with cancer and chemotherapy and radiation and all that kind of stuff, and if they've had a chance to utilize cannabis for that, then they see what benefit it brings on a whole bunch of different levels, right? From depression and to like appetite, stimulation, all kinds of stuff. Anyways, and so I started to like look into like research about this thing that I've been using for like 20 years, right? And like it was just amazing the stories I found. And so by that point, I had about a 2-year period of using pharmaceuticals, of utilizing them to control my condition. And as I slowly started to introduce cannabis into that equation, and then withdraw from the other medications, or at least reduce them, honestly, I could not believe, I thought I knew about the plant, but I didn't know anything like what I learned from getting ill. And so I understand when people say, oh, I'm a patient, I'm justified in using cannabis, and I've got all these reasons, these really good reasons, so don't judge me, right? Don't think I'm a stoner, don't even call me that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you, and that is true, I guess, but I'm here to tell you that from being a social consumer to being a medical consumer, the only difference is the intention of which you're approaching. And so, who are we to say that we need it more than somebody else? Because again, we are not in that person's mind and in that person's heart and in that person's life to know what it is that they are dealing.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to say about that is I have to just say, if you want to know about someone's cannabis use, then the most cool thing you could do is ask them about it. My husband now, my husband of 21 years after last week, he was the first person to actually ask me about cannabis use, about my cannabis use, without coming from that place of, why are you doing that?
Right.
Or are you high? Or whatever, right?
What's wrong with your eyes?
Yeah.
What's that smell?
You must be high. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And he was the first one to actually ask me, what is that experience like for you? What made you start using cannabis? Why do you continue to do this almost 5 decades later? And how, why is it important to you? And so, honestly, it was incredibly refreshing. It was incredibly touching. And it really meant a lot to me, and it meant so much to me that it just inspired the whole approach to cannabis use that I call cannatherapy. So there.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've mentioned it before, but your husband is not a consumer.
Exactly. I think I did mention it, but I'll mention it again.
Okay, just to make sure, I wanted to underline that point because that's that for cannabis people especially, I think that there's an example for us right there.
Yeah, and it's not always that way. I know that sometimes when people are in relationship with people who are non-consumers, it's not easy for them to understand why this person that they have an opinion about, obviously a good opinion, or hopefully they wouldn't be with them.
Yeah.
But they want to know why that person is diverting resources, why that person puts up with the stigma, and sometimes that stigma spills over to them, right? So like they might not be as understanding or interested. They might just be looking at it like it's a negative thing. It's like a character defect.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
And I think as cannabis consumers, I think we all come across people in our lives that are kind of view us like that.
Yeah. 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 It's one of those things that for me it makes my relationship to cannabis stronger, because I know what I've gone through. I know what bullshit I've put up with in order to have this as part of my life. And now it's wonderful because I work in the cannabis industry, and I get to travel and meet people, and everyone's open to weed now, and you can smoke and everything's cool, and in Canada, so obviously that's not the same way everywhere, but it's really opened up a lot. And family members now, they're like, oh wow, you're doing pretty well, huh? like and they're they don't
real history. Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, okay. So but this is the moment where all of those years, for me, decades of just feeling that stigma, feeling that judgment. And now I'm like, well, it's like, if that didn't stop me, if the threat of going to jail for smoking didn't stop me, nothing else is good. Nothing's going to get in my way of appreciating this plan and using and utilizing it for the things that I want to utilize it for. And what I loved about what you're saying before in the story, I'm glad we finally got the whole thing on mic, because I think you've maybe shared bits and pieces, but this is the first time you've really kind of laid it out. What I love about that is that your reluctance to put yourself in that place of I deserve it more than you kind of vibe. And I think that is, and again, another example, hopefully from this episode, that people can take when it comes to looking at other cannabis consumers. As much as this episode, when we wanted to talk about this concept of utilizing and use and intentional use, it's like, I think it became quite clear to both of us that what we really wanted to talk about was the stigma around all of this stuff. Like, before we can even get into your top 3 tips on how to use cannabis intentionally, we need to clear this air, like to truly clear the air, and to let all of our listeners and viewers and community know where we stand on this, so that when we do talk about intentional use, and we do talk about how to utilize cannabis as a tool, and we talked about that in other episodes already about how it can be a great tool in the toolkit. But I think it's important that we got this part out of really clearing our throats on this topic. And I hope that people who are listening and commenting can feel that sense of unity that you and I feel with each other as consumers. And we never have that vibe between us of oh, how much have you smoked today, or are you going to smoke later? Like, that doesn't even enter into the conversation.
It's not even
right?
a question.
Right. And so it's just one of those things where I hope that people can take that sense of unity and connection and say, okay, we're going to stand strong here. We're not going to turn against each other. However way you use the plant, however you want to consume it, whatever your approach is, you have a right to figure out for you what that is. And I want to stand up for that right. for everyone to make that choice for themselves.
Yeah, that's very powerful what you're saying, because we deserve that, and we deserve to treat each other kindly, you know, because I don't care. Like, I don't care who you are and where you're at. You know, if you are committed to cannabis, if you're a consumer and you're committed to that, then you are risking for that plant something, right? You know, you mentioned it, right? You know, people risk all kinds of things, losing their job, you know, having their children taken away. That was always the big leverage against women, right? Having your children taken away. You know, dealing with criminals. So that kind of thing, that happens all the time, especially in an environment that it's still illegal. But that can also happen, like I was talking with a friend from the States, and that can also happen in places like in those states in the US where it is legal. You know, they still can't bank. So like there's a whole criminal element around that. Like, it's just like, oh my God, you know, like, honestly, the worst thing about cannabis, about that whole plant, is the criminal element.
Yeah.
Like, that is the worst thing about it. It's not the plant itself. It's not any of its effects. It's not, you know, anything to do with it. It's about, when it's criminalized, the dangerousness of it all.
Yeah.
That I just cannot condone that. And, you know, especially when it comes that you have this comparison available to in alcohol. And like, I know lots of people want to say, oh, you know, cannabis is not like alcohol, and it's not, in the sense of, you know, its makeup and you know what it does and its benefit. No, it's not like alcohol. But in how it's sort of treated in many ways, its approach to the treatment is like alcohol. And so it's very difficult for me to not be frustrated when I am subjected to stigma for cannabis use, but that same stigma is changed into embracing for alcohol, you know, like, and then people's opinions. And honestly, like, I've run into a lot of this, and I know that's one of the reasons that we want to talk to about it, because we both run into it in different ways over the last little while. So before I get into my story, I'm just like, want to ask you, Nick, like, tell me, like, where do you feel this? I mean, God, you're in Canada, you know, you're at home, like it's supposed to be legal. Okay, like, why would you have to deal with stigma and stereotypes? Why would that be a thing?
Well, I mean, I have family that are non-consumers, and they haven't got the memo yet. And so, you know, like, it's not that I'm a grown person, you know, I have my own life. And so I don't really care too much like what people's views of me are. Like, that doesn't, I less and less have time to care about that kind of thing. But whether it's, you know, inside my own relationship, and I've written about this for an upcoming article on Unison News, which is about this topic, and particularly about the article is about how to have difficult conversations about cannabis, either with your doctor or your family members who are non-consumers. And so that was the point of that piece. And I drew from my own experience with my own partner. And we've been together for 9 years. But you know, that we've battled about the topic of cannabis. And so the stigma that we're talking about, you know, how much, how often, what time you start, what time you stop, all of that, I've faced incredibly judgmental views and comments from her over the years. Now, it's not all the time, and overall she's supportive, but it's underlying. It's something that I had to really fight for inside of the relationship, and to not give in, and to not to not go with the flow on that one. I had to just really like put my feet down and dig my heels in and say, you know, this is part of my life. Like Seth Rogen says, this is like glasses or shoes. When I leave the house in the morning, I'm not, you know, if I need to put on shoes, you know, I'm not going without shoes. I'm not taking a tolerance break from shoes or from being able to see clearly with my glasses. And it's just one of those things that, you know, over time, I don't know if I think we've reached a level of peace about it. But I don't think it's either one of us is like content with the conversation. And I think, but having family members, you know, who, like, this is not my partner, this is just other family members, you know, like you talked about earlier when you were diagnosed, that a lot of people were quick to blame cannabis. And I think for many people who are consumers, anything goes wrong in our life, any little thing, it's the weed. You lost your job, oh, it's smoking too much weed, you know, like anything that happens there, that's the first thing they're going to point to. Where, you know, and I had a conversation online on LinkedIn a while back by someone who's not in the industry, and said he was a fellow marketer, and he would never work in cannabis because he said it was a drug, right? So I was trying to tease out like kind of the conversation with him, but yeah, he was basically, you know, coming out with, well, you know, cannabis, I know a lot of boys who smoked weed and they never amounted to shit in life. They kind of just sat around and smoked weed and never did anything. And a lot of people have this, you know, they collapse correlation and causality, right? They think because something exists together that one caused the other. Whereas a lot of people are turning to cannabis to deal with the difficult conditions that they find themselves in, and the various diagnosed or undiagnosed things that they struggle with that cannabis can help. And for me, I had the opposite when I was struggling, like in my 20s. We spoke about this in an earlier episode. When I was struggling to figure out professionally of where I was at in life, it was cannabis that actually helped guide me to a more successful place. And it was cannabis that helped me have the confidence to actually go through with that. So I think people just really misunderstand this plant at a fundamental level. And unfortunately, that also spills into the cannabis community itself. There's a lot of people that don't have basic understanding about this. And so I'm really happy that we can talk about this today and in other episodes, just because there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of ignorance, that is still a lot of willful blindness as well.
Absolutely. It made me think, like, you know, I don't care. I don't care why you use cannabis. That's your business. It's not my business. I'm glad if you find relief from cannabis. I'm like super glad that you found the plant. Like I'm so happy because I believe in the plant. And I don't just believe in it because of my own personal experience. I believe in it for the thousands, millions of people who have had good experiences in one way or another with cannabis. And, you know, yes, I guess the other thing we could touch about that on the other side of that, and I think actually we talked about this in another episode as well, but it bears repeating that, you know, a lot of people when they're, you know, trying cannabis or when they've had a bad experience, the first question, if they're coming to me and I'm doing any kind of coaching with them, my first question is going to be, you know, what were the circumstances around that? Where were you? Was there alcohol? And 9 times, honest to God, I'm not even exaggerating, 9 times out of 10, alcohol was involved. And that's fine. Like, you know, lots of us drink and smoke at the same time or whatever. You know, that can be its own energy too. But the thing about it is they always blame the bad experience on the cannabis. Mm-hmm. They never blame it on having anything to do with the alcohol, or they'll say something like, yeah, I shouldn't have mixed those two together.
Yeah.
That probably made it just as bad. But they would never consider trying cannabis on its own. You know what I mean? Because they just view it in that same vein as alcohol for them. Like, that's fine, you know, it can be that for you. Those ladies who, you know, like their wine o'clock, like, honestly, but I'm telling you right now, the alcohol that you keep referring to and glorifying is not the flex that you think it is. It's just not. Because, you know, alcohol is a depressant. So you're taking something to give you a little buzz, get you a little high, get you a little uplifted, right? De-stress, you know, whatever. But that thing that you're taking is like a double-edged sword, right? So it can in turn cause you many more problems, and those can be health problems, and those can be, wellness of all kinds of sorts of ways, right? So I'm just saying, like, you know, honestly, I personally, yeah, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I think everybody should try cannabis. Just a little bit, you know, just a little bit.
You can put it on your skin, you know, like just whatever. You could drink the leaves as tea, and it's not going to get you high. Like, you don't have to, you know, I think everyone should go all the way at one point and have the full experience. But if you're scared, if you really are scared, or if you have relatives, you know, give them a little topical cream so that they can see that there's other ways to look at this plant. Like, this is not what they think it is. And this is not what the society that we've grown up thinks this is. And ultimately, it's not even what a lot of people in this industry or this community think it is. Like, it's so much more than we have been told or been given an opportunity to see at this point.
And the thing about it is, like, the one thing that, you know, I guess is kind of why this is important topics to me is that, you know, there's always us people who, you know, just want to help other people, right? It's just in our heart, you know, it's our vocation, just like you know, in your own way. And so, like, I get it. I get that helping people makes us feel good. It makes us feel like the work that we do for ourselves, you know, has like an added bonus, right? It's a benefit, all these traumas and dramas that we go through. That we find a benefit in that. So it was not for no just in vain, you know, for have no benefit to it. Okay, I get that. But, you know, honestly, I just feel like we're not here to control the planet. Yes, I agree with science. I agree to studying it. I agree because, you know, there's probably things that we don't even know that it can do. Right?
Well, literally every day we're learning like stuff that we did not know about this plant.
Exactly. And I'm telling you one thing right now, if something happens to me, I start, you know, exhibiting signs of, you know, anything like Alzheimer's or dementia or, you know, heart disease, all these kinds of things. I feel like in some way, in some methodology, cannabis will be there to help me. You know, so I hope that we can sort out, because honestly, like, I was thinking last week, I ran into this situation. I don't even want to get into what the situation was, but basically it was somebody who is a non-consumer trying to make decisions for a group of other people who may or may not be consumers. And actually, some of them are consumers, but they don't tell them that because they know about the discrimination they're going to face because of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have just seen this my whole life, right? All these closet consumers, because there's so much shame wrapped around it. They can't possibly, to their people, you know, feel like they can be authentic, feel like they can be themselves because there's something fundamentally wrong with it. And so this is why this topic is important to me, because, you know, we don't need, like Nick was saying earlier, we don't need to help participate and you know, perpetuate that shame that is put on us simply for our, you know, our lifestyle choice, right? Simply because we choose a plant, right? So like, yeah, we don't want to be those people. We don't want to be doing that to each other because we're the only people that understand us, to be honest. So, yeah. And who doesn't like having being around their puff buds, right? You know, someone that like, if you start talking about one thing and then switch to another topic, they're like right there with you.
Yeah, it's that camaraderie, you know, and that friendship, and it's that, you know, what I think that's one of the things I'm so grateful to you for is that the camaraderie that we have as consumers together. We don't always find ourselves in the same area code, but when we are, like when we are hanging out or whatever, it's like there's a different type of intimacy and a different type of friendship and camaraderie that takes place because of this plant and because of our commitment to it before we met, and then even our commitment together, what we've been building since we've started collaborating. It's something that I wish for others, and I wish I had more, like where I am and where I am. Like that's something I want more of for myself, you know, coming up in, you know, in the next year and in the coming years, right? Is that kind of a camaraderie in that relationship, because it's tough out there. It is tough out there. You know, I don't know when people are going to watch this episode, but like, I don't have to like name the top 3 news headlines to make it relevant. Like everybody knows what I mean when I say that. And, you know, and a lot, and boy, has cannabis supported so many people through these very tumultuous times, right? From the pandemic on through, cannabis, as people are discovering it every day to solve their problems with sleep or pain or anguish or depression or anxiety or like it's a magical plant. And we're here to enjoy it. And it's for whatever reason, you know, God loves us or whatever, because we have it here on this planet, you know? And so I don't know, like, I don't know who put it there and I don't know why, but I'm here to enjoy it as much as I can and to make sure everyone has the opportunity to do that as well.
Me too. And that seems like a great place to kind of sign off, finish up for the evening. And I've really enjoyed talking about this topic with you, Nick. I just think it's just so important. And you know, if anybody's watching this, I guess what I say to you is like, you know, hang out with us. We're not going to judge you. If you don't have a puff bud close to you, you know, maybe we can all kind of get together online one day and have a nice session or something, right? Because I just love my puff buds. They're the people. You know, I have friends that are non-consumers, but I'm telling you, like, there's just something about that puff bud that really gets me. You know, when you meet someone like that and they just get you, and they can be completely different than you, but you find that commonality in that moment. So, thank you, Nick.
Thanks. You, Dee. And let us know in the comments if you'd like to be part of an online sesh someday. Drop it in the comments. Let us know. If there's enough interest, we'll put it together.
For sure, man. I'm looking forward to all kinds of new things that we could do and coming up in the new year as we're winding down this one, and definitely doing some online stuff with the people would be amazing.
For sure. Yeah. All right, Dee, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody for watching and listening. Definitely share if you feel inspired. It helps us a lot. Like the channel, subscribe, do all those things. You know what to do if you love it. And we'll see you next time on Thriving with the Vibes. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Peace.